Now we're going to start recording.
Okay.
Just so you're warned. But so Eric wants prizes, just, because.
I always want prizes. I want Zoom to let folks know who logged the most hours, maybe by state or organization, who logged the most hours during this period.
Forward
I don't know if they get a prize or if they get therapy, but they get something.
I think it's kind of prizes and therapy. Therapy as prizes.
Therapy is the prize.
Maybe part of that. When you go find the storytelling call, email, whatever thing that I sent this morning. Oh my gosh. Has it been all Zoom all day for everybody else?
Since 7 a.m. when I first saw you, Cecilia and Eric.
Yes. That was great. That was a very energetic call. Now I need coffee, though.
I'm going to be making some lunch. I'll probably be on mute and maybe even off video, but I'll be listening in.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to try to... Hi, Tiana. It's been a minute since we've seen you. I miss being in chat.
This is my first time on a storytelling call. I can't believe it. But.
Welcome. It's about effing time. No, I'm kidding.
I
know. And Jeff, do you want to drop the link for the right? I always get the wrong storytelling. One of those, we need to cross out and say, don't use this one. Right. So.
Yeah, I'm doing it now.
Yeah, that would be great.
You got it. It was the correct one was in the email. So good job.
Oh, good. I know, because I copied what Jeff sent me. I trying to stay on top of things. So we had some really interesting discussion a couple of weeks ago when we talked about invitations, and I'm wondering, all right, so we've probably done this popcorn question before, but I feel like it would be a good popcorn question to find out, or just name a book or something you read that that you jazzed out on for some reason or other, whether it was an article or whatnot. Maybe it was just something Jeff wrote that we keep reading. So the popcorn question is, tell us very briefly about something you read that impacted you, and I'll kick off and say that, and for Ashley and Tiana, who haven't been on these calls before, we do the popcorn question to start, and the last part of the popcorn question is to call on the next person. So I know both of you're not very shy, and you've met some of these people before, so I'll type the question in the chat, something you read that you connected with, and when COVID stuff started, I started reading Margaret Wheatley's Who Do You Choose to Be, and that kind of got me through some of the bumps along the way, and helped me to sense make through a lot of that stuff. So it doesn't, yes, and I'm going to call on Lauren.
Who did you say to go?
Lauren.
You said me. Sorry. I'm a little slow there. So the book that has been really affecting me, and I'm still not finished with it, but it's just rocking my world, is this book by this woman, Sarah Schulman, called Conflict is Not Abuse. And it really looks at, I think, what now we would call cancel culture, but basically our deepening inability to be in conflict with other people, and to immediately call anytime we're feeling conflicted like abuse, and then not actually being able to engage with other people in tense situations, and how that affects policing and our inability to resolve conflicts with other people, and also take accountability in how we contribute to minor and macro conflict. So anyway, Conflict is Not Abuse. Really amazing book. Tiana, nice to see you.
Ooh, I knew you were going to call on me. I feel like all I read is children's books right now. I have twin toddlers who are 4. But I definitely have been reading a lot of things online in the last, especially the last month, trying to just educate myself and open up my mind. And I feel like actually the most recent thing I read, and this is totally not even, this just is coincidence, was the Right to Start, Victor's manifesto. I didn't get through the whole thing, but I think, this is our obvious subtext at Co-Starters, but so many of these issues that we're seeing could be addressed with like the work that we're doing. And I think it just being able to see the relevance in some of it's the same conversations that we've been having for years, but to see the relevance and seeing people being able to connect the relevance of the deeper issues and the importance of making real relationships and real trust and real connections and real opportunities for people, not just opportunities at face value, but really doing the work to make things more equitable. That manifesto is actually really encouraging to me to see some of the stuff being just brought to light. The timing, I think, is just really great. So, popcorn. I'm gonna pick Eric.
Why, thank you. Hello there. Let's see. So I've got a show and tell. So this is something I picked up about 3 or so years ago. It's 100. What is it? 100 tricks or 100 tips to appear smart in meetings. And regardless of the fact that it's mostly tongue-in-cheek and it's sort of exposing different things that you see a lot of people do, but it's the first time that I came across someone who's become really quite famous recently, Sarah Cooper of the Sarah Cooper Review. So she did, it's a real fun, neat book. I've loved her online presence for a couple of years now. She also did one that's, what is it? It's about how to appear, how to be a woman in business and appear non-threatening, something along those lines. So I love her approach to taking the norms and themes of the day and having fun with it, but also kind of getting people to experience it in a different light. I will hand off to Ashley.
Okay. I've really been diving into a lot of articles around the history of the 13th Amendment and police violence and the crime bill. And so that's really been consuming a lot of my reading right now. Well, sorry, I will popcorn to Jeff.
So thank you. So I'm kind of focusing on leadership. Basically, there's a book called Presence, Human Purpose in the Field of the Future by Peter Senge, Otto Scharmer, Joseph Jaworski, and Betty Sue Flowers. Really kind of geeking out on that, basically tapping leadership potential and changing worldviews and our worldviews to tap into our potential as a society. And I will pick Richard to go next.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm working my way through my copy of Tribes by Seth Godin. I really like the format of the kind of like short stories that kind of impart a lesson, around building tribes and community, and I think it's really, really cool. So I'm not a huge reader, but I really like this book and should get more into reading. I'm gonna give it to, has Christine gone yet?
I have not. I knew that you would, Richard. I also am not a big reader, so the first thing that came to mind was Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. I think, I would say 60% of it resonated, 30% didn't, but just being able to understand like how we are all kind of conduits or can be channels for creative genius or any of the work that we do, and knowing it's not us, but it's like we show up to work and our genius shows up to work and together we create the masterpiece. It's really always a nice way to frame the work that we all do so that we don't get too bogged down by it or too hard on ourselves for it. So that was a message that I really took away from that book and really resonated with. I am not sure if Megan has gone yet.
I have not, and I'm sort of coming in late, so I'm gathering that people are talking about things that they've read or they're reading that resonated with them. And I'll just share that I had a conversation with an elder friend of mine recently who's retired now, and she, just based on what we were talking about, she shared the New Economy Coalition with me, which is an organization that's doing this collective leadership model. And so I've just been throwing myself into their website, and their sort of mission and initial introduction to who they are just really spoke to me. So I'd like to just amplify that to folks, just as an interesting collective leadership model, as well as what they're doing to look at different economic models and social justice and social change. So that's that. And I don't know who's gone because I came in late. So I'll pick someone. Let's see.
I think,
there's
Annika.
Lauren.
Yeah.
Okay. Or Annika. Yep, that sounds good.
Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our 1-hour book reading of the Manifesto for Moral Revolution. I'm so glad you asked. I was leaving through like crazy because I want to read so much of it to you. I will read one little passage to you. Those I've known who've most changed the world exhibit a voracious curiosity about the world and other people, and a willingness to listen and empathize with those unlike them. These people stand apart not because of school degrees or the size of their bank accounts, but because of their character, their willingness to build reservoirs of courage and stand for their beliefs, even if they stand alone. This book, y'all, is so good. It's all about 12 skills of a leader who wants to change the world. And super light written in that it always has a story. It's always rooted in social entrepreneurship. And Jacqueline Novogratz is the founder of Acumen, which has really spearheaded impact investing over the last 20 years. And I'm doing this together with an online course. So this is not about racial inequity in particular, yet so much of what she's talking about holding tension within ourselves and between us and people who are not like us, rings so true. Everybody, please read this. If I had the budget, I would send all of you a copy because this is very, very, very good. And I will pass to Jess Edwards, hoping that she hasn't gone yet.
Thanks, Annika. Yes, that book sounds awesome. So thank you for for mailing it to me. Just kidding. I know you're not. So I also, like everyone else, not a huge reader, but I'm in a women's business book club, and it's really fun because everyone recommends kind of a cool strategic book. And this most recent one we did was called No Hard Feelings, The Secret Power of Embracing Emotions at Work. It's a super quick read. It has really funny tongue-in-cheek kind of cartoon visuals of all kind of meetings and types of folks that you have to deal with at work. But what I really liked about it was it really is a strong just communication strategy. So it just walks you through before you start a project or a meeting. Everyone talks about how they best work, how to interact with them, what the expectations are, and goes from there. So I like it. It's short, it's sweet. It's an actual strategic communications plan for how to work with others and break down the barriers that always happen when communication isn't there or doesn't work for everybody. So that's it. And I shared it in the group. And did Christine get to go yet? I think, was I the last one? Maybe.
I think did everyone get a chance to go?
Great.
Awesome. Thanks, Jess.
Sorry, if you're waiting for me, I'm going to turn it over to, I don't know if Jeff and Annika have something that they want to share, and then I know that Lauren was going to share more information with us. So I will.
Yes, so it's in the agenda. So if we're moving on to, assuming we don't have any updates, or maybe we do them after, but the main meetup activity is to have Lauren kick it off with an introduction to the strategic doing NRP group. And Christine was heavily involved in that too. So maybe they can share the background about that group and the storytelling project that they were involved with for a little bit, which looped in Annika and myself and Tiana. So I think let's start there, if you're ready, Lauren.
Sure. It should be short and sweet, really, I think. So since probably February, there have been a small group of NRPs that we've convened to build more trust, kind of like how the Gold Champions have been building trust and relationship over the last months and years. And so we started that process just with a few groups of folks who could probably stand to have some better relationships and trust with one another, and also start to share some mutual interests. And that has gone actually really well. They've, I think, really kind of gotten each other's back on a number of projects in a more organic way, but they've also decided, they meet weekly for 30 minutes, and they've decided to sort of coordinate their efforts on a number of projects. And one of the things that they really identified across many of the NRPs is the need for more advocacy for ecosystem builders. So who are ecosystem builders? What's their role, especially in the time of COVID right now? And how storytelling could really amplify that. And during those conversations, sorry, my dog is having a big dream right now. So if you hear funny noises, it's not me. It's this big Great Dane. So back to the future. What I was saying is that many of these organizations identified that there was a need for more storytelling, but they saw an opportunity for a coordinated effort around it. So we had a few weeks of discussion. That's when we invited Jeff and Annika, because of course many of them already were aware of the storytelling efforts that have been started in this group and are on regular discussion. So we wanted to integrate that in the discussion. And primarily the focus of that group was to align on a theme that group would be interested in promoting across their organizations. And the purpose of today is that I just wanted to share what that theme was, which is Ecosystems Unite. You're all very familiar with that Facebook group, I think. And just talk a little bit more about what their thinking was and see if we could adopt it as a much broader group, actually, including this storytelling group. Because many of you are the active storytelling tellers in this network or this community, and or you are working with those organizations that I'm mentioning, and you'll actually get the actual storytelling work done. And so we just kind of wanted to align with things around them, but where it ended up is they discussed a number of different themes they were interested in, and the one that really rose to the top was Ecosystems Unite. This hashtag around the Ecosystems Unite. They were really excited by activating that more and the thought of what that could look like. They weren't super prescriptive. That's really for this group to determine what you would like to do with this. But they were really excited if we could all get behind that, because they felt like it has sort of a cool dual meaning. One, right now, it's a really important time for local ecosystems to come together and to people to unite as a local ecosystem. But also there's an opportunity for ecosystems to unite with each other, and for us to really back each other up as ecosystem builders and to really emphasize that. And the group really liked the idea of not creating a new name or campaign or hashtag, but to build on the work that Cecilia and others have already done to create this Ecosystems Unite Facebook group and other things to really just continue with the momentum that was already created there. So I'll stop there. Christine, do you have anything else to add? Did I leave anything out in terms of the origin story about where this came from and what we're hoping to do?
I think that was the majority of it. I think also in terms of, and Tiana can maybe speak to this more a little bit too from her perspective from co-starters, but each of these organizations also have their own kind of like community and newsletter and platforms. And so one of the other things was also, in addition to acknowledging the efforts of this group already, how do we also just lift up all of our efforts together? And so I think that was really the thing that Lauren was kind of the connective tissue for between that group and this group. And so ensuring that, you know, it doesn't feel like, oh, anyone's like saying, do this thing. It's just like, we're all having this interest. How do we just coordinate our efforts more? And so really just wanting to, I've been calling it like supercharging, but accelerating the efforts of Ecosystems Unite as a hashtag, as an overarching theme that can really help us during this time tell more cohesive storytelling around ecosystem builders. And I see Annika raising her hand.
Yes.
What is the overarching goal? And the reason I ask that is just communicating for the sake of communicating, like fizzles out, doesn't really attract people. And we've played around a little bit with the idea of story arches, where we know those are really interesting stories, and see if we can find something that's really a story worth telling, where we can sort of hone our craft a little bit. Do you have any insight into that?
So a couple of things, at least from my perspective, and Lauren, please feel free to chime in too. In terms of the overall ESHIP and how a lot of our work I've been seeing is needed right now, I've been using the phrase, I've been borrowing it from someone, but like, I'd rather be specific and wrong than vague and right. And with ecosystem building, we've been using that term in different ways, in different contexts. It means different things. How do we be really specific with the way that we are lifting up the stories of ecosystems? And how do we ensure they're all systems level approaches or different things that we're all getting clearer on what ecosystem means when we actually say it? And so I think that would be one of the important kind of like goals of this initiative is we're telling so many stories. How do we start creating some typology around it, it's more definition, so that we can get clear on what it looks like to say, when we say ecosystem, we mean this, 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 and this, not just this, if that makes sense.
And I don't want to hijack the conversation at all, I promise, but we already have a definition for ecosystem building. So I'm always confused when that comes back up and saying, yeah, but what is an ecosystem? What do we mean by ecosystem building? I was personally relieved when we had it in the playbook with the definition, here's what it means, here's how we do it. So where's that falling short, in your opinion, that apparently there is a need to explain more or give more examples?
I might differ a little bit, Christine. I think that's something, I think we will evolve our definition the more we write about it. And so I would say that might be a secondary goal or tertiary goal to this. The purpose of the Ecosystems Unite is, from what I understood, and the request is that we evolve that together here if we're open to that. But we have many organizations who have said that they're willing to use their platforms to promote that hashtag and also to promote more storytelling in their organizations around that. Whatever we determine here should be the shape of that. So I'm not handing you a preconceived campaign right now. I'm handing you kind of a notion and agreement around a shared kind of hashtag and wanting to go along with the momentum. But what I understood on a basic level in terms of goals is to talk a little bit about the interdependence. So those were some things that were discussed, as how our communities need each other right now, and using the ecosystem hashtag to emphasize this moment of interdependence and bringing the community together. And so how could we use this as a campaign that would emphasize that opportunity inside our cities or ecosystems? So Ecosystems Unite, and telling stories about interdependence and the opportunity of that connectivity, but also telling the story about how ecosystems across the country are supporting each other through the Ecosystems Unite group across NRPs. And so really just activating, I would say, these stories of interdependence, mutual support, that are helping grow these ecosystems. And with that, then I think further helping define what ecosystem building is and giving it sort of a face. And that's what I understood was sort of the intentionality of wanting to show of the group. They didn't structure a campaign, they didn't get into details, but it was more, that was the opportunity that they saw, and that was I guess the hashtag they really were excited to unite around here. But I welcome maybe Jeff, Tiana, others who've been involved in the conversation to kind of help me along here to see how we might transition that into this group here and make it something more structured. Yeah.
Make sure I'm not muted. Yeah, I think it was pretty vague. And I think the idea I came away from it with was that this group storytelling call could become kind of the way to implement the main ideas. And that really, I think, means getting a little bit more clarity and detail about what it means, and then also doing the work. I think going forward, this call can kind of evolve a bit and be a little bit more focused on that Ecosystems Unite campaign, lifting up each other's efforts. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned yet that we talked about on those strategic doing calls was each of the participants, NRPs and others like EV Hub and Unsung Heroes, in our articles and stories, if we had like a little footer kind of a thing at the bottom of each article to say, follow other stories of ecosystem builders and link to Forward Cities and SCN and co-starters and NBIA, either links to their stories or a blurb about them and a link, that kind of a thing. So I think that's something that we can develop, and I'd be happy to put together a simple HTML template that can just be plopped in for everybody to just plop in their articles. That'd be pretty straightforward and easy to do. It'd just be good to get from everybody what landing page on their website they want used. And we would want to decide if we want to use a simple like Twitter length description of the organization and what it does, perhaps. But I think that could actually be a good discussion for this call right now.
Jess, can I invite you to kind of expound a little bit more on what you just put in the chat?
Sure, yeah. To Annika's point, I had all the same questions, so thanks, Annika, for bringing those up. But, it can get to a point where it's kind of ESHIP overload of, I felt very confident. I love the streamlined website. I love the Slack channel. I love this group. So check. That's 3 things, right? And then you're going to add a 4th that isn't, to Christine's point, very specialized strategic of adding something more than what you guys are already doing with sharing content and conversations. And I will say, with my inbox every day, when I see an email from Andy or an email that I know is guaranteed worth my time to research, I guess how it's being brought up right now is kind of, I don't see the value. If I knew that the new content was specifically tools to implement or specifically really action items that I could use and replicate, I would take time. But if it's just going to be, let's just discuss how everyone's collaborating and how great everyone is, I really don't see the value. And I actually worry you guys will dilute the credibility and the quality that ESHIP's already doing. If it keeps going, that there's all these kind of initiatives that are spurring off, it's really diluting the central connection points, because I know to go to the website, I know to go to the Slack channel, I know to go to here, and if I get an email from Andy, I'll open it. But if I get another thing that I don't really get a value for, I have to get to work every day, and so I'm just talking for myself, and it's really coming from a personal, but I love ESHIP so much, and I just don't want the quality of the content and the conversation to get so diluted and confusing that we just get away from a very kind of narrowed down path. But that's the best I can do to explain it. Sorry if I took too much time, but
no, I think that's totally valid, Jess. I know that I talked to my son and about blogging because he's been traveling the world, and so I was like, oh, you should blog about it because people like to read about it. And he's like, I don't want to put more banality into the world. Like, plenty of people blog about traveling. I'm not doing anything super revolutionary or whatever. My story's not that much cooler than others, but I think what I've modeled, what I love this group and what we've modeled organically, and maybe a little bit, but not forced, but enforced or advocating for, is advocating for each other. When Jeff writes a piece, he may share it with us, but it's all of us amplifying that voice and that's a big advocacy thing that I've noticed, you know, happens in this group very organically. It's like, oh, let me share that cool piece that Annika wrote. But I hear you, Lauren, in wanting to help support some connectedness. So maybe help refine that just a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks. I sense some misunderstanding. I think that, and I actually really appreciate, Jess, how clearly you voiced that concern, because I don't think anybody wants that. And if this would go into that direction, then I would definitely suggest we don't do anything. I think the real question was across many of these organizations that are publishing or sharing or working to write, is there an opportunity to make a more unified campaign and conversation? Would that be helpful? Their sense was yes. And so if that's not shared, then perhaps that's the response back to that group and nothing happens here. That, you know, this is only a potential proposal, you know, but that was their sense in the conversation. And so maybe I would rely more, Tiana and Jeff, since you're more active in day-to-day storytelling, how this landed for you and kind of how maybe where the misunderstanding here might be happening. Not saying that anything has to happen, but that was the intention, is could there, like, what would that serve if there was a powerful shared campaign across practitioners and across NRPs around the idea of ecosystems unite and bringing together local and national ecosystems to explore storytelling about coming together, and what would the details of that be? Anyway, that's I don't know if that clarifies, but
oh, go ahead, Tiana.
I missed the last two, so I've been trying to catch up a little bit on what the conclusion was of, like, what the strategic dream group, what their idea was to bring to this group. So I think I understand that it didn't evolve a whole lot more, except there was alignment around perhaps we could use this shared hashtag to help highlight articles that we're already doing and working on. I don't think we were talking about creating like new content or new channels. It was really about just helping to, I like to use the word constellate a little bit, like all of the different players, especially the ones who are actively creating content, a way for us to both, you know, we're doing this informally already. We're like, through our own relationships, through our own following each other on channels, we're finding things and resharing them. But could there be a little bit more coordinated effort around a particular theme of stories? So my takeaway was there's two things. One was, is there a theme currently that we could align around out of all the work we're doing? And it was kind of that, you just said it, the collaborative, like working across networks, working across, you know, partnering together, the ecosystems unite, that's what that is. Are there stories that we're telling, and can we highlight those and actually share them? Even how we, as like, we're partnering with Forward Cities on a webinar tomorrow, you know, about the collective work we're doing in a community. So those kind of stories, we would be telling those stories anyway, but we're actually helping. That story doesn't just have value to our network and to Forward Cities network. It can be used as a storytelling mechanism for someone else to show the power of collaboration. So that, I think, was the goal in my mind, was that we obviously all have our own marketing goals we're trying to achieve. That's sometimes really difficult to manage, as like, we're a for-profit, we're one of the few for-profits in this mix. So we're constantly trying to figure out how we keep continuing to support this larger work, but we don't lose our need to do marketing goals. Then the other thing I would say is, and I put this in the Slack chat I don't remember which group it was. In general, I think newcomers to ecosystem building are very confused about all of us and what we do, what our organizations are. So anything we can do to help differentiate and highlight the various pieces we play, whether that's that little footer that Jeff's talking about, and maybe there's more than, there's actually a little blurb too, that isn't, we're not all just the same, saying the same thing, but there's something unique in each of those. That would go a long way, I think, toward helping people understand the different roles we're playing and how they work together.
So I'm trying to make sense of, there's some differing opinions going around, and I think from the strategic doing group, I think they really, the people in those NRP representing those NRPs really resonated around the idea of, I can't remember who summarized it here, maybe Lauren, local ecosystems coming together and ecosystems uniting to get with each other. And I think that can be interpreted in two ways. One is the various groups we represent, coordinating it with new campaigns and new storytelling about how ecosystems are coming together at a local level or across geographies to help each other. That's one way to interpret it. The other is much simpler, is just coordinating, aligning our efforts to amplify each other's voices. And I think that perhaps, based on what I'm seeing here, is probably the best way to take this. I mean, I think it's a really simple ask to, like Cecilia said, just share each other's stories, find a mechanism to do that a little better, where like in referencing each other in our articles or something. But if we can align and coordinate our storytelling efforts, I think we can have a bigger impact. I think that's the much more doable action than trying to coordinate a new storytelling campaign amongst different NRPs about uniting ecosystems. That I think is a harder lift to do and coordinate, and requires a lot of effort. And I think maybe that is some of the sense that I'm hearing, from Jess. No, not yet another thing to look at. But if we can coordinate our own efforts and just help amplify each other's voices, I don't know, Jess, does that resonate or not?
No.
No. So let me dig in a little deeper. So if Forward Cities saw and amplified our Unsung Heroes campaign, would that be a good thing or a bad thing?
Not a bad thing, but what Christine said early, I got excited about when Christine said, let's be specific, not general of like, let's just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, because that's the information overload. I don't have time, and I don't have interest in trying to see if maybe this week's or this month's campaign is going to have something I could take away. If it was specifically tools that are like, let's do a case study, a universal case study of this worked here, everyone try it and get back to us if it works, something like that, that it's like an actual tool. But I think it's just the content overload of what Christine said. It excited me, but then when it kind of went back to let's just share to share, I kind of was like, okay, deflated.
I'd love to circle back because Jess, like Lauren mentioned, I really appreciate your candor. And then I think to add on to what Annika, Lauren, Tiana, and Jeff kind of shared thus far, my understanding is that there's no need to create more content. Like what like Richard, others said, like, I'm not a big reader. I don't check out, like, there's just so much. What's helpful though is understanding what are the tools, what are the resources, what are the practices that are actually tangibly helpful. So what I kind of look at ESHIP as is like, there's a lot of theory that we are doing now, we're trying to land it. And who lands it are the NRPs and each of you. And so how do we actually understand what are the tools and practices that we can highlight through a story of a community or where it's been applicable, and then lift that up through the sharing of that story through all of these different organizations who play different roles, like Tiana is saying, so that we can actually differentiate what are the offerings that we each have, so that it's not another thing that we're looking for or another thing that we're trying to do. We're just actually trying to show how everyone fits into one big ecosystem. We don't want to add more to anyone's plate, and we don't want to do anything that doesn't give us energy. Like I brought it up on this morning's call, like all of our work at the end of the day has to be energizing and fun for us first, if we have any interest in engaging other people outside of this group. And so I think that's something that, in terms of what we're trying to connect dots here, is knowing that there's a group of organizations who are ready and energized and willing to be able to amplify whatever stories are coming out of this group, and to provide a little bit more coordination and opportunities to align around Ecosystems Unite, so that at this time when all these communities are trying to figure out, what do I do? There's some communities who are doing things and trying things, and we want to lift up those stories through the organizations they're working with, whether it be Forward Cities, whether it be co-starters or others, and being able to bridge the gap between theory and practice. So how do we lift up the stories of practice, of specific tools, programs, and resources? Does that make a little more sense, hopefully? Or sound more energizing and more valuable?
So let me share, and Lauren, I think that this is how we get more clarity, right? I think that we have to dig into this thing to figure out what the heck is it that we're all trying to do. So just the backstory on that whole Ecosystems Unite thing was, it came out of a conversation Jeff, Eric, David Ponraj, and I had during the SCN Summit. So towards the tail end of the SCN Summit, things started to shut down. And we realized that we would start being secluded and all trying to solve this big, huge problem. And there was so much information out there that we didn't know which direction to turn. And then what we see in ecosystem is everybody seems to try to replicate, but not really replicate because they have no good examples of things that are working, right? And we said, you know, normally it's a nodal thing that we think about in ecosystems. Everybody kind of interconnected with each other, and this is how we weave. For addressing something like COVID, we really needed a centralized location where we could be more hub and spoke about information. Okay, so what is your community foundation doing? Oh, you know what? Our community foundation is looking for something to do, and here's a community that put together a model. Oh, you know what? The co-working space is shutting down and they need to notify all their people. Here is an example of how they did that. And so what we were uniting is just tangible solutions that people were sharing. And I don't know how you want to take that and broaden it to this other ecosystem, but that was the whole goal. Like, it was agnostic in that nobody owned the site. People could freely contribute. The only thing that we asked was, you are freely contributing to solve this problem, right? Not like amplify. So the only two posts that I think I delete, that I know that I personally deleted off of that group, was somebody promoting their own book. I was like, you have nothing to do with COVID, go away. And then the other one was somebody had already posted that like 2 posts ago. So it was repetitive, but aside from that, it was like a very organic, all right, you have something to contribute and share that would be helpful for other people, great. And that was the only, the part was that nobody owned it. Right? It was facilitated and held up, and then all of us would kind of take turns, and somebody wants to join, we just let them join. It wasn't like, so it goes back to that question, how do you lead when no one's leading, right? No one's in charge. And how do you process so much information when there's so much information out there? So to Jess's point, yeah, more information doesn't help, but how can we share best practices was basically the mindset of how we started this Ecosystems Unite movement. Where we want to go from there, I'm curious to see where this goes.
Like Eric's got an interesting chat comment there. So I'm sorry, Jess, go ahead.
I think that's helped definitely understand a little bit more of the direction. I guess it's because it's 2 tracks for me. Like, anything that comes from ESHIP or Kaufman, I know is vetted quality, like super thoughtful. I can just take time to really digest it. And I love the ESHIP Facebook group and I love these groups, but the organic stuff, definitely I have to sift through to see if it's credible or not. And you already, I guess I just worry about the dilution of, like, to your point, the hub and spoke, the Facebook groups are so great. And the more we add, the more decentralized. The whole goal is to get everyone to go to 1 or 2 platforms. I think it's kind of counterproductive. But again, this is totally me. And so please, other people speak up. But I'm trying to give input that you might not have thought of, you know, but it's just, I love the ESHIP initiative, and I just, I want to understand fully what Unite will be a value add versus a distraction or decentralizing. You guys have done such a good job having kind of 2 or 3 places to go, and I worry it's gonna dilute. But again, I'm kind of, I don't want to monopolize. So, but yeah, those are just my concerns. I don't know if anyone agrees, but it's just trying to give you feedback as a fan of what you guys are doing and the credibility that you bring as leaders. So thank you for all your work.
I think to Jess's point, and Lauren could probably remember, you know, when we had all that information going on that Facebook page of the Ecosystems Unite Facebook page, it got to be a lot of noise.
Yes.
Right? It was overwhelming. And so that's also a challenge when no one's in charge, right? Well, we didn't want to censor people. People were just trying to be helpful, but it's a lot. So that's something else too. So what part of Ecosystems Unite is powerful, and what part of it needs a little more tending?
I think that's a good question, and it's probably one we're going to have to sit and stew on for a bit. But the thought that comes to my mind is not so much Ecosystems Unite, but ecosystem building storytellers align more than as a first step. And so that goes back to the call that we just had. Some of us just had an hour or two that Tiana organized. So it's the storytellers, and Ashley, you need to be invited to that, by the way. So it's some of the key players in the ecosystem building world who are doing storytelling. So it's Annika and myself and Forward Cities, and who else was on? Tiana, and SCN definitely needs to be on there, because I think Ashley is one of the key storytellers in the community. And it's about, you know, coordinating what we're talking about and seeing if there's ways to amplify our stories, or, you know, if Yuval at Keystone is going to do an article or a podcast on such and such, then maybe we hold off for a week in publishing and something that's got a similar alignment so we can help lift that up. I think that's a first step, is really trying to get that more
Coordinated.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I had a call with Yuval, or I've had ongoing calls with Yuval to align what their thematics will be, to then also inform what that story group is that Tiana's talking about. And I think to Jess's point, it's kind of like maybe what we can look at is like the Ecosystems Unite Facebook page is almost at the top of the funnel of like people just sharing different stories, different examples, different things. This group is almost like a filter of some sorts to be like, okay, well, what is some of the vetting of that? What is this? What is the actual story? What is the actual practice? What is the actual thing that we're standing up? And can we go deeper into that? And then we disseminate that through all of our different channels, so that, to Jess's point, all these organizations have some kind of a credibility halo. And so there is an understanding that this product or tool or service is really applicable at a local level to support ecosystem building activity. Something like that is kind of how I'm hearing some of this. Annika.
Can I add to that? Also, in light of what Ashley just typed into the chat, and Ashley, why don't you quickly just say what you meant, and then I can build on that.
Sure. So we all have to produce content, and we all know that, you know, telling stories and sharing best practices and case studies is helpful. But right now, all of our ecosystems are struggling, and we're all trying to figure out how we can be the most helpful. And so from what I am interpreting this is like, we're not trying to add another platform or theme for everyone to go to, but rather come up with a theme that will be the most helpful in all ecosystems. So if we're all sharing stories around a united front and a theme, you know, whether you read every single one of those stories or not is irrelevant, but rather if we're all amplifying one specific effort, then it helps raise the efforts of ecosystem building work. Does that make sense?
I would say now I really respect, and I have no preference. Like if it's not energizing, the group doesn't want to move forward, but I think that Ashley, you managed much better than I did to encapsulate the essence of where this whole conversation came from. That was why that group and Jeff and others were having that conversation originally, is, wow, we're all sharing our message, but one thing we know, one thing they said they felt they knew for sure was there still isn't enough recognition more broadly about the power of this work. And if we would unite around that through something even just as simple as a hashtag or a common theme, could we really, really amplify the message of this, and then help, our individual efforts. So I think that was the idea, less so than really getting into the weeds about how everybody has to do that in a specific way or to make too much of a lift, but some basic guidelines essentially about how to participate in a shared theme and effort enough to loosely coordinate people.
I have a suggestion for that.
Yeah.
So Tiana has already set up a meeting with, as Jeff said, with storytellers. We could invite, instead of inviting the people who participated in the strategic doing, because their calendars are full, but ask if they will send or pass on the invitation to their marketing or communications department, whether they want to participate in a 45-minute call once a month. Because all that we do is we all share sort of our content calendars, is what am I working on right now, what's going on in the next month, and what do I need? And that's a super good format. And that way Ashley won't know, oh, IMBIA is doing this in September, we're doing something similar, that's aligned. So that would be hopefully an easy lift for everyone but Tiana, because she's managing the invites. But I think that could be very useful. And then if Jess hears something on that call that she wants to pick up or whatever, then I think those themes might actually start emerging. And if we just have a space to exchange those ideas, I think that'd be really, really wonderful. And I also want to give kudos to people like Ashley and Tiana, because creating content right now, I don't even know where you get it. And it is so resource intensive to write good content right now. So heads to you both, and everybody else is doing that work, because it's really, really hard at the moment.
Thank you.
And Christine, would you mind sharing just on I think that's a really powerful coordination effort. So I think that sounds amazing. And in addition, just to clarify, kind of one thing that Jeff was mentioning in terms of coordination that's kind of already been underway is about creating this footer or something that can be very easy for all storytelling efforts just to link to other storytelling efforts. And Christine, you've already been in the process of actually capturing a lot of those to prepare that, which would just be a really easy thing that each of us could include in our storytelling efforts at the bottom as a footer to say, are you interested in other ecosystem stories, or however we end up formulating it, and pointing towards the myriad of things all of you are creating, and then across the network and with other NRPs. And so I think you want to share your update on how that's going.
I don't know if there's a specific update per se, just in what Jeff mentioned, just capturing everyone's kind of preferred, where they're aggregating their stories so that everyone can then know where to go when they want to go down a rabbit hole. To Jess's point around, I'm not, looking for more things to read, but when I do need it, do I know where to go? And so really just capturing that and then working with Jeff and then creating that footer. Yep.
Can I add one more thing to that? Also, I think this might be hosted at Co-Starters or somewhere else. But one of the things that we've been struggling with is so many events where if Co-Starters does a refocus workshop that's super relevant to people in Virginia, whether they've participated or not. So I think if we as marketing people, or we and the marketing people, get together and can just share events over the next 4 weeks, that's a true ecosystems unite, sort of spreading the knowledge, and here's a webinar on racial equity, blah, blah, blah. So we can really spread that out for the 4 weeks that are to come.
Yeah,
I think that would create value.
What I've loved, I know that Co-Starters created that national events calendar. I think there's 2 different versions of it, but because that calendar I have active on my computer, I saw that the webinar is happening tomorrow with Co-Starters in 4 cities. And so I signed up for that. Okay. And so I think being able to have stuff like that people can opt into, right? It's already in their flow of their calendar. I live on my calendar. And if I see that, it's I can register that. I can click that here and I have the registration link. So I think there's, exactly to that point, just creating a place where we can centralize all of it.
When Jeff and I started conversations over it was like a year and a half ago or more, before EB Hub, the whole idea of a repository was that you could go somewhere for that information. You don't have to scour the websites and Google every term that you can think of in order to capture. So now there's a myriad of places that you can go, but if we can kind of help contain at least some touch points, so that here's a go-to place where you can find a number of things, or at least get that, if you follow that hashtag, you'll be able to get to the next thing that's included in this, so that we are working and amplifying all those voices together, right? So not 50 million people creating content, but there's a more centralized or searchable location to find that content, if that's what you're looking towards. So I think that's great. We have 5 minutes. It sounds like we went around and landed, which is nice, because I think sometimes we start off on a path and then there's like, oh, well, these people made that decision, so we either go along with it or we don't go along with it, and we don't have these discussions. And this gives clarity and more cohesion to some of the work that we're all doing. So that's great. Does anyone have any last minute comments or remarks? Richard, you like kind of sat here and listened and didn't input. As somebody who's taking part in the 1 Million Cups community and startup weekends and stuff like that, but fairly recently to the ESHIP community, is this resonating? Does this make sense? Is it working? Is it the parts that are working in the communities that you're already involved in? And what is it that we can engage those communities to be part of?
I think that's a great question. I'm sitting here like listening and trying to catch up on all this terminology that I don't know, without being like, hey guys, what's this? And like bothering you guys. But telling stories as a whole, right, in all the communities that I'm a part of is really important to kind of push forward entrepreneurship as a whole. And I think hearing from entrepreneurs, hearing from community leaders, ecosystem builders on what's happening and what's out there, especially in a time like this, is especially important. And knowing that you're just not alone, right? At the end of the day, it's like the individual business owner or the entrepreneur, the founder, right? Knowing that there's other people out there going through the same thing is really important. So that's how I've always felt. And I don't know if that resonates or if that's like off base, but like putting these stories out there, whether we create them or amplify them or do whatever, that really just, it needs to happen, I think. And in like 1 Million Cups, right? Hearing the presentations from local business owners and entrepreneurs about their struggles through this time, and the community coming together to help them, that's been really powerful through this time, from my experience, to drive forward entrepreneurship, not just for the presenter, but also the people in attendance at 1 Million Cups. And so I don't know, I'm still fairly very new to all this stuff, but things sound good, and just having these calls and working through all this stuff is amazing. And coming to the table is like step one of whatever, and it's I think it's magical. It's great.
Thank you, Richard. I think that we talk about putting entrepreneurs front and center. The challenge has been that when we put entrepreneurs front and center, sometimes we forget that as ecosystem builders, we're that invisible glue, that mycelium that nobody ever gets to see. So we are really focused on putting ecosystem builders also in the spotlight, and because otherwise we don't affirm or validate the fact that we're an important part of this process. So, so I want to invite you all to be okay with putting our efforts out there for people to see. We don't want to be like the best kept secret that goes away, right? So, any last comments, Jeff and Annika?
Well, so I know we're running over time and we got to get to another meeting, but the thought that's been coming to my mind right now is I've seen over the last year and a half or so that ecosystem builders don't seem to really just want to just read ecosystem building stories as like a hobby. It's just, oh, I'm going to go read some stories right now. They're too busy. What I'm seeing is it's more of a just-in-time approach. It's like, oh, I need to know how to do this. Let me go search and find out if anybody has written about that. So the ultimate goal, I think, is we need to make it easier for ecosystem builders to find helpful information, stories, resources, case studies when they need it. And however that gets manifested is still TBD. I'm not convinced anymore that it's a one-stop hub versus maybe a small network of places where they can go and find it. So that's what I'll end this with.
Awesome. I think if we get all the marketing people together in that call, there's still great benefit, Jeff, to you to source and replicate like vetted stories and tools through EB Hub. I think there's a lot of value to that, so that people don't have to go through 5 different websites, but can start with you and then sort of go from there. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Hopefully we haven't scared Tiana and Ashley from coming back again, but it sounds like, well, you know, you're part of the community, so you have been for a while. Thanks, Jess, for trusting us and feeling comfortable to speak your truth. I think that's, we don't say that we value that enough, but we do.
No, you guys are doing a great job. That's why, you know, I love it. And I just want to, if I can, you know, from a fan point of view, but thank you guys for being open and all your hard work the last 3 years. It's been amazing. So thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see some people on the next call.
Bye, and see you in a minute, a couple of people.